Hey guys, Josh from the Redneck Homestead channel. I'm here with Jacob and Billy. Can't see Billy, but he's kind of shy.
I'm still recuperating from my uphill excursion.
Slog. So as you can tell, we're here at the Offgrid cabin, and we are like the paragon of preparedness. We came up here and we got tubs of food and we got everything we need, and we're like, let's make some coffee. We want some coffee. And we had one cup. One cup. What a joke. I mean, how many cups do we have in our cupboards at home? And we look through and say, we have too many coffee cups. And we only have one cup here. Well, I bet you if we took inventory of this place, we would find that this place, though it's warm and covered from the elements, is basically useless in a real survival type scenario.
Yeah, I'm drinking out of this thing, if you can see it.
What a joke.
Cut off water bottle.
So we're going to have an episode of the Redneck Roundtable right here at the cabin. And as we've talked about before, this idea called the Redneck Roundtable is just a few friends just getting around talking about whatever the subject may be. We'll try not to keep it too boring. You can turn off the tape whenever you want, or you can listen to the whole thing. So
no, they have to listen to the whole thing.
You have to listen to the whole thing, Billy said. So I don't know.
Well, you're saying about preparedness. It's funny. I mean, you forgot the keys.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That was a good start.
Well, it's easy to forget things that are really. It kind of brings to mind how you need to anticipate that you're going to forget something and have something in place so you don't have to remember it. So you know what I mean? Well, don't be dependent on remembering the keys.
Okay, so I mean, our plans kind of changed because of that, and it could have been something even more important, you know?
Well, think about this, though. This routinization that you're talking about, that's what I've relied upon so I don't forget the keys. Mm-hmm. And to add a layer to what you just said, I always leave the cabin keys, with the cabin and everything else, whether it's the excavator, the bulldozer, the tractor, the shed, the cabin keys, whatever. All the keys are on a big key ring, you know, we've seen it.
The janitor.
And the janitor key ring. And they are sitting in the center console of my truck. They're there right now.
Right.
But we changed how we were getting up here today.
Right.
Yeah.
And well,
that's why you need some redundancies. Maybe you could speak about that as a pilot with like checklists and redundancies and stuff like that. I mean, I think that you should have like a key like hidden someplace where you know it is and whoever else needs to know knows where it is. So in case for some reason you can't get your truck or you're someplace else and your wife needs to get up here or whatever, at least you know there's something else in place, because it's easy to think that things are going to go a certain way and then you change your plan and all of a sudden nothing works.
Well, truth be told, the only reason we had a key to get into the cabin in the first place is because I bought new locks for basically everything.
Yeah.
And
you just happened to bring the new key with you.
Well, what happened was I put one of they're all keyed identically, so I put one of the locks on one of my trailers, and I figured, well, I've got to put a copy of that key on my main key ring. And
Your primary key.
My primary key.
So it's almost incidental?
It was totally accidental.
Oh, wow.
Not even, I wish it were incidental, it's more accidental.
And it's funny, like with the lock picking stuff,
yeah.
I'll usually bring like a little lockpick set that I have.
Jacob's an expert lock picker.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm an expert.
Not an expert, but journeyman?
Sure.
Okay.
I usually bring like a little lockpick set if we're going somewhere.
Just in case.
And it's funny how often you think like, you'd think, when are you going to need a lockpick set? I mean, come on. And there have been dozens of times when I'm like, shoot, I wish I had. Yeah. It's not to break in somewhere, it's because you really need it. So.
Well, I mean, I would imagine, especially being like school-aged and whenever you come home, your parents aren't home, you forgot your key to your house.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to break into the house.
I did that once.
Oh, man. Well,
you only quote break into someplace that you have a legal right to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, my feeling is yeah, we've got a bunch of propane, we got lots of wood. We have the ability to be here. We have a decent amount of food up here. Some entertainment, not much. But we don't have cups to drink coffee out of. That's pathetic.
Yeah. Do you have forks?
I have forks, yeah.
Spoons?
Yeah, spoons.
Okay. Well,
but nothing. Oh, you do have food, though.
You have food. Yeah. So, I don't know.
But isn't it amazing, like we were saying about like how different, like, I mean, this happens to be an extremely mild winter and it's not, like, dangerously cold out now. It's like 30 degrees maybe.
Do you remember this time last year?
Oh,
what the temperature was?
Oh, yeah.
0.
Or less.
Yeah. We took that hike before you bought the place. It was
10 or 15 below or something like that?
That was 2 years ago, believe it or not.
And that's where, I mean, your hand is without a glove for 30 seconds. You can't do anything.
Yep.
So.
I don't know. It's everything about this whole thing is. I mean, not to politicize anything. I don't want to get into too much.
Well, just
politics.
what I said about the heat, though. I mean, it sounds so self-evident, but how important it is in cold areas to make sure you have a reliable heat source wherever you're going.
Yeah.
It's easy to think like, oh, I'll be fine. When you get into some place and it's 15 or 20 degrees below zero out, you freeze to death very easily. It doesn't take much to get into serious trouble.
Yeah.
Well, like we've said in the past, especially when vehicles and equipment have gotten stuck, bad things happen very fast in the cold, and good things happen very slow and very little warning.
Yeah.
Here,
I mean, the truth is, we're not that removed here. I mean, we have the neighbors a mile down the road. If you really need to, you walk down there, and he has electricity and everything.
Sure, but not if you're hurt or you're injured.
But it could easily be where you're somewhere, and the engine doesn't start, and you have a real problem.
That's right. So. Well, I mean, here we have some good redundancy with heat, and many people who scoff at the anything less than the purest approach to being off-grid will look at a propane heater and say, that's not off-grid. And I agree. I tend to have a purist definition of off-grid as well. No batteries, no solar, nothing with an engine.
Yeah.
But
nothing you have to refill like propane.
But it's kind of all on a continuum,
It's all on a continuum, and what are you preparing for? I mean, all I'm preparing for is the possibility that
nothing works.
That nothing works. I mean,
and the truth is, coming up here a day like today, we're not going to come here and start chopping wood and make a fire.
Well, even with wood, by the time you get everything heated up, it's like we're getting ready to leave.
So, I mean, the truth is, this is much easier and it works better almost all the time. So
yeah, it does.
For now, it's good.
And like we've talked about in the past, putting something in like this lets us leave at 8 o'clock at night one night, decide to come up here, not get here till 11, and not have to wait till 2 in the morning for the wood stove to heat up due to all of our less than seasoned wood.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Depends on what you're getting ready for.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what to... my view has but it's not exclusively that everything is going to go permanently bad. Maybe I want to use this just for fun, too.
Yeah, you know how,
Yeah.
You know how we've discussed in the past how, and I've had this discussion with other friends, how it's easy to prepare for the most extreme situation, whether it's a physical situation or even a financial situation or whatever, where you're into one thing that's so far into the extreme, but yet you're unprepared for everything all the interim steps that might come before that point.
Right. Like people are so invested in shorting a stock and they haven't looked at the upside, or they're so invested in real estate and whatever.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, there's examples, whether it's financial or anything else, you could be prepared for the end of the world, but how about the 10 years it took to get to the point where nothing works? And it's easy to miss a lot of opportunities that you should be taking advantage of.
Well, not that any of us or anyone watching has any real insight as to what could practically happen. What do you guys think is likely to be on the horizon for the next, say, 3 to 5 years? Between now and 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think just the economy is going to get worse and worse.
But isn't it booming right now? I mean, the unemployment report, State of the Union, it's all great.
It's all fabricated.
What?
Well, I mean, the truth is...
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I can't really picture something happening as, a single huge event like some nuclear bomb or something like that where, you wake up one morning and nothing works and you end up driving up here.
Well, but Jacob, think about, like for me, a lot of it has to do with, I think in many ways and under many scenarios, the culmination of where all of a sudden where life changes is when you have no electricity. That's when life changes dramatically. And whether it's a financial thing or a war or, the bomb is dropped type of thing.
Do you want to talk about briefly when we didn't have power?
Well, that's what I was going to say to you. We were in New Jersey a few years ago with Hurricane, whatever.
Irene.
Was that what it was? Whatever, there were like 2 or 3 hurricanes in a row that hit us then. Yeah. And we were without power at one point for 11 days straight.
Wow.
And it was like... I mean, we kind of adapted. The weather wasn't an issue. It was the one time it was like where you didn't need heat, you didn't need air. It was like fine in terms of that. So it wasn't that big of a deal. And literally a mile away, the supermarkets worked, the gas stations were going, everything was working.
And this is in a extremely nice town of
there was no
high
concern
income
about
zip code.
crime and our neighbors crawling through our windows or anything. There was no concern about that. Like I said, there were no real weather issues or anything. And even at that, we were without electricity for 11 days. And it's amazing how everything... And we were in a house. We were in a regular house, but nothing worked, you know?
Well, I have a friend. Actually, he's been in one of our earlier videos. Richard. He has a 200 and some odd year old house like mine. And when he bought it, it was in a similar condition. It had no heating system, and et cetera, et cetera. He put a monster of a wood stove in the basement. And that was last year, actually. It was last winter when it was like negative 10, 20, 30 all winter. He, with that single wood stove, kept his house at 60 degrees.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool to consider that all he needs is wood, and he's in reasonably comfortable.
But the electricity is really, that's really when you understand how dependent we are on this system. And
but in the same way, it's pretty easy to live without electricity. I mean,
if you're prepared for it.
I mean, I go to a summer camp for 2 weeks every year, and actually this past summer I was there for 2 months, and I'm going to be working there this summer. We don't have any electricity, and you know, it's not like we're all running around not knowing what to do. It's very...
But everything is developed.
Everything is completely surrounded by woods, and we know that there's no electricity, and everything works well.
Well, that's why when people say like, oh, well, you know, an EMP, you know, electromagnetic pulse will hit, and we're gonna get put back into the 1800s. No, you're not, because in the 1800s their lives were developed around no electricity.
Right.
Whereas here we're dependent on electricity. So that's the wrong analogy.
Actually, it's like more like the 1950s when they started to really depend on things, but they didn't have the technologies that we have now.
No, it's a totally different thing, and people don't realize how incredibly dependent we are on for everything. It's, well, I don't need, well, yeah, I don't have a well, I have public water. Well, how do you think the water gets to you?
Yeah, that's right.
At some point, there's a pump someplace.
That's right.
Almost
some guy
always
fixing the pump every month when it breaks.
And well, that pump's powered by diesel, which gets trucked in where?
Yeah.
By a truck that pumped it into the truck.
I mean, everything is dependent.
Yeah.
It's all dependent.
And we're all too dependent.
Interdependent.
Well, I mean, to give you an example, the public utility company came around. They've got these new meters going in. They probably happened to your house. And Julie calls me up, and she goes, there's some guy in our front yard. He's changing out our meters. Our power just went off. My laundry machine.
It's not a smart meter, is it?
It's a smart meter.
Oh, it is?
And
really?
so we have 4 meters at the house. And he got through 2 of them, and Julie called me, you know, panicking, like, why is the power out, etc. There's a guy in our yard. So I said, put him on the phone. I promptly kicked the guy off the property.
You did the whole trespass thing?
We got into the trespass thing a little bit, yes.
So you remotely kicked him off.
That's right.
That's impressive.
Remote control. Yeah. Anyways, I had a few questions for the guy. You know, what's the deal? What frequency does this transmit at? Who's paying for...
What kind of antenna are you running?
What are you running for? Is it a dipole? Or is... Oh, by the way, I wanted to... we'll segue into that subject. Jacob took the both of the the advanced ham exams with me. He's the one who I took my test with. In fact, funny story how this all played out. Jacob and Billy had come over. They just stopped by and saw me in the driveway or something, and I said, hey, they're like, what are you doing this week? I'm like, well, I'm taking the general exam. And this was on like a Thursday.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, Jacob, you want to take it with me?
Which is the second level.
The second level, yeah. And I said, hey, Jacob, you want to take it? He goes, what do you think?
What was this? This was like Thursday night or something?
It was
Saturday morning, right?
Like
5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you serious? You've been studying for 2 weeks, and I'm just going to jump in and take it?
Yep. And he took it and got 100% on it.
Yeah, we both did. So
that was crazy. That was pretty impressive.
And then we got the extra.
Yeah, and so Jacob is one of the younger, I would imagine, people that has his amateur extra. I'm sure there are young people that all over the place, but it's
none of the class.
Highly unusual.
It's probably like, I would say it's less than 1%. I bet. People are like under 18. I think.
All I know is that I have a decent foundation in the sciences and physics and math and electromagnetics and just the understanding. And I can say it was difficult.
Yeah, and I'm in school mode where I'm used to studying the small amount that I do, and
what I'm saying is,
it is public school mode though.
That's true.
You're actually feeding back into the system. You're probably teaching them a few things, but Anyway, so yeah, I just thought that I'd give that shout out to Jacob here because, and you got a new call sign too.
I did K3APB. So if you want to hail me, what were you saying about no electricity?
Oh yeah, so back to the thing. So I wanted to know a little bit about the smart meter thing, and the guy had absolutely no idea what the
he's just following orders.
He was just following orders,
yeah.
just doing what his bosses said. He's just being a yes sir man. And so a few days later, the public utility company sends me a letter. Oh, we just want you to know everything will be okay. They don't answer any of my questions. It's a standard form letter to people who are objecting to the smart meter.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. So just yesterday, I might have even been on the phone with you. I had to get off the telephone with somebody, and there were two guys standing in the front yard, and I'm looking out the window. I'm holding my little two-month-old, and I look at the guy like, "What are you doing here? Like, what are you doing in my yard? Who are you?" And so he comes around to the door. I go, "Is there something I can help you out with?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "Well, we're here to change out the other 2 meters." I go, "Well, actually, you're really not here to change out the other 2 meters.
You might think you're here.
You think you're here to." It turns out I found the only 2 nice guys that work for the utility company.
Wow.
Really?
And they're really cool guys. And one was like a senior manager that had been with the company for 43 years.
Did they know more about the
He knew
purpose?
everything.
Yeah.
I said, "What frequency transmit on?" He goes, "Oh, 32.5. And I said, "Okay, and what's the transmission power? And does the smart meter sleep, or does it transmit on an interval?" He goes, "No, it sleeps, and we wake it up, and this and that."
Upper sideband, lower sideband.
That's right. He probably transmits.
standard
So probably
Simple
one of the more atypical conversations he's had with homeowners, I would think.
I would imagine, but I mean, I think that anybody who's getting one of these types of things involuntarily pushed on them like this should have the answers that they to the questions they have.
Yeah.
But anyways, the point of the whole story was that Julie was without electricity for literally 3 to 5 minutes at the most, and like her whole world came apart.
Yeah.
Not because she can't handle living without it; it's because she had a load of laundry going and she had the dishwasher going, and but. To me, I would much prefer being in this little cabin right here.
It all comes down to the whole concept of being dependent or independent of things. I mean, we're very, very dependent on electricity and how it's delivered and everything else. And it's. I mean, I know people who work for different utilities, and they say that a lot of this stuff is hanging by a thread. It's extremely vulnerable.
I mean, how about the cell phone system and the communication system?
Everything is very, very tenuous.
Well, is it vulnerable or is it highly controlled? I mean, I don't know that it breaks down on its own very often.
Or
I think it breaks down in a controlled,
Yeah. intentional
fashion.
Well, I do know that after
it certainly can. If it doesn't, it certainly can.
Yeah.
Right.
It can be used.
But after those hurricanes in New Jersey where we were, for months they just had stuff, rigged up however they wanted with ropes tied to telephone poles with things lashed to trees. And it was like, I mean, it looked like we were living in Africa.
There were wires shorting out on trees, burning.
Oh yeah, like they barely
and
fixed anything. And I mean, all what had to happen is for some wind to blow a telephone pole over, and the whole town would have no electricity. So
yeah, it's really.
But do you remember the Boston bombing and of course 9/11? Trying to make a phone call. Yeah.
Might want to put quotes with that.
Oh man, we'll get into that little joke that Billy had. We'll get into that another day, or not.
How about you said you were in DC? And
I was gonna say that you were saying about the cell service. I was in DC with literally hundreds of thousands, actually over 1 million other people at some protest rally, something like that. And we got off the buses and whatever, and no one's cell phones worked. I mean, they clearly jammed the signal, cut off, whatever they did, nobody could communicate within a certain area in Washington.
Do you think that just happened, or do you think they did?
No,
whoever they is?
No, everything was fine until we got into a certain
area. Who is they,
area.
and why did they do it?
They, I don't know, whoever was the police, the government, the Capitol Police, I don't know, whoever is in control of it through the cooperative phone company. They made sure that nobody can communicate in that group that was within a square mile or whatever.
But what if it's for our safety?
How is that for our safety?
So, terrorists can't communicate and blow stuff up.
I guess that's what they might say. I mean, why would they do it with a... I mean, we weren't...
Or more likely, it's because they don't want people coordinating any sort of
thing to go against what they want to do.
Well, interestingly, some people said, without getting too far into it, well, what we should do is, as we're walking to the Capitol, we should basically do an about-face and head the other way and go to the White House.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if nobody could communicate with their cell phones, it would have been extremely difficult to coordinate it.
Yeah.
Unless they had ham radios.
That's right.
But so, I mean, it's interesting you're saying about the cell phones, like you're saying, is it that the service stinks and that there's problems with it? And I think what Jacob said indicates that there are, a lot of it is just worn out, busted up stuff, and they're trying to save money, the utilities, and I'm sure that the phone companies do the same thing with, crappy equipment and everything else, and
As
maintenance.
with the roads and bridges.
Yeah, right. But
in airports.
But on the other hand, we know that they could cut it off as they see fit too, whether it's communications or electricity, and that gets the communications gets back to why we really all started with the ham radio stuff. I mean, Josh has been, you've made up for lost time with this, but I mean, Jacob and I were involved with this 5 or 6 years ago. We didn't really go very far with it, but we
recognized the need.
Oh yeah, we knew that we had a lot of vulnerability with potentially not being able to communicate through the normal channels.
The ability to be able to set up a complicated and pervasive communication network with no infrastructure is extremely appealing.
Your own infrastructure.
Your own.
You control.
You literally take your radio, throw it in a backpack, take a slingshot with a wire, shoot it
QRP it up to the tree, and you're ready to
go. Yeah, I mean, it's really remarkable to consider that you can communicate near distance and far distance with next to no effort and next to no power. And of course, it's not off-grid purist because it involves power.
A battery,
But the fact still remains that moving water can spin a water wheel. You could do a micro-hydro situation to charge a capacitor even that would, run your radio long enough to get an SOS out or something.
Yeah. Well, I think the main point about all of this is that you need to rethink what you need and how you get it. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to be up here and think, all right, I want to take a 20-minute shower every morning, because it's not going to happen.
Although it can. I mean, there are ways to engineer a 20-minute shower.
Would you agree that, generally speaking, though, and it probably is a lesson for life, aside from the whole prepping aspect of things, that we should become less dependent on... I guess less dependent on more things or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
We should just be less dependent.
Well, I think we should speaking specifically the word that you use, prepping implies that one is not prepared. I think we should just practice.
We should be living
in a prepared state.
We should be living in a less dependent condition, really.
Yeah.
And then when whatever it is happens, we're going to be in a position where we're not that we're not going to notice, of course, but we're not going to have to scurry around and change everything because we're going to be living like that. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to totally move off grid at this point.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you should be able to flip the switch between your level of higher dependence and no dependence relatively easily.
Yeah.
I'm not there. I don't know if you guys are, but I'm not there.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like the curve between, practical and comfort and dependence.
Yeah.
And at some point you need to give up one or the other.
Right.
And
well, at this point, I really enjoy being able to go up to my thermostat and turning it an eighth of an inch.
That might be a bad example.
59 to 60.
Yeah, with my Actually, my heating system is pretty well under control.
Yeah.
Cross my fingers. But I actually enjoy being able to go and just press a button or turn the dial.
Yeah.
And the room becomes more comfortable. I like being able to open the shower valve and hot water just pours out forever.
But how often it's interesting that you're bringing these type of examples up. But how many conversations have we had about, now yours or mine, it doesn't matter. Everybody can participate in this conversation. The heat's not working right. The air conditioning's not working right. The dishwasher's broken again. I mean, these things are like, they're not that dependable.
No, they're not.
And they seem less dependable now than ever.
I agree.
And it's like, all right, so you have a dishwasher, but it's like, I mean, I know ours was brand new. We're always having problems with it.
And it's funny, because I remember growing up, my parents would have dishwashers 25, 30 years, or what, not dishwasher, appliances. Now it's because we're replacing them every 3-4 years.
Well, right.
Yeah.
But in general, it seems like if we were living a simpler life, more generally, I don't know if all the technology and all the what we consider trappings of modernity are really I don't know if it's a good thing in many ways. You know, I mean, I appreciate things, and I like cars and motorcycles and all kinds of stuff, but in a lot of ways, this stuff there's too much complication. I mean, how much aggravation have you had with your cell phone?
I mean, that's...
Every time we have a conversation, it's a problem.
It is, yeah.
You know?
You're better off jumping on HF and hammering it that way.
Set up an NVIS antenna and just get your boy 80 miles away.
Yeah, work them.
Work.
You know, one thing we were talking about before, I think before we were on the air, so to speak, we were talking about what type of things we would do if we first came to the cabin and you knew you weren't going back home, so to speak. It's like, all right, what's the first thing you do? And we were talking about, you were talking about eating and getting wood together and like that kind of stuff. But one thing we didn't mention was, let's assume something, obviously if you're here because you have to be here, then something happened out there. And the first thing you're going to want to do is know what's going on. In some way, you're going to, whether it's because of friends or family, or just more generally how to plan your next move and how to adjust to things, you're going to want communication. I mean, that's the first, and think how often it is that, you know, something happens. It's like the power goes out. What's the first thing you, under normal circumstances, do? You pick up the phone and you call the power company and you go,
what's going on?
No, when's the power coming back on?
And invariably, the answer is, I don't know, we don't know, we have crews out there, we're working on it.
They never say, oh, don't worry, to be on in 20 minutes.
As far as I'm concerned, no answer is, it's not coming back on.
Yeah, well, how about, I mean, even this is kind of a weird example. We called the internet provider because something was going on with where the internet wasn't working properly. We ended up being basically on hold for a half hour before we hung up. No one knows how to fix this.
Well, even when you call the power company, you end up getting a recording.
Right.
That tells you nothing.
That's right. If this is a medical emergency, hang up and dial 911.
Right.
Well, so, but to your point that people are going to want information, I mean, I would rather have crowdsourced information that came from real life on the street.
The media source.
And I don't filter down through everyone, you know.
Everyone's own filter and their own BS meter.
You can make your own judgment then, and you get different sources, and you determine whether they're independent of each other and what their source was or whatever as much as you can, instead of putting on the television and having whatever anchor who's getting paid by the guy who probably caused the problem to start with telling you what you should do.
Let's face it, there's always a lot of truth that run through a lot of rumors.
Yeah,
I mean, a single rumor source isn't very reliable, but 10 rumors that are saying the same thing are pretty reliable.
Especially if the sources are not the same.
That's exactly. So, I mean, that's amateur radio right there, and it serves so many different, I mean, like I said in my last amateur radio video, I feel like it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, but the practical value is exceedingly high.
You know, it's amazing to think, like, while on the topic of communications and stuff, like, to think of how we got our information, even if you were pretty advanced, like 20 years ago. I mean, there's basically no internet information.
Right.
Think about, like, now, I mean, like, Jacob and I haven't had television, and our family hasn't had television in, like, 10 or 12 years or whatever it is. We don't miss it.
And we're about 5 years, so.
You know, and it's like, and we didn't do it for any kind of like weird reason. It's just I got tired of paying for it. I got tired of like having crappy service and crappy programs and
it
everything.
Wasn't like this like cable cutter fad. It was just
no,
like,
not at all. It's
this
just
is
like
a waste of time. It's a waste of money, but we don't.
And then
and
really the internet took its place, and it's like it's scary to think of the idea of not having access to information that you acquire from various sources,
right? And
getting back to where you put on one of the 3 or 4 networks, and then that's even before cable, where there were basically there were a few networks and they all told you the same thing, pretty much.
One shade of the same lie.
Yeah, it's just amazing to think. You know, in some way we're critical of the information we get now, and we're like, oh, if it were X amount of years ago, the media was different. Well, but there was no alternative, really.
That's right.
What was the alternative? Some newspaper with some editorial policy that you thought was good, and you get the stuff when it's 3 weeks after it happened.
That's right.
It's meaningless.
Well, I think also it gets to the point where you don't care what's going on around you. You know, if you're doing your own thing here and you're not being affected by it, you know, what do you need to know?
Yep.
It's really not too much. If, you know, what's his name, down the street radios you and says, listen, guys...
Emergency.
Guys in trucks, I don't recognize them, they're driving up your road. Yeah, that's important. But if some guy in Florida is telling you something, I mean, how important is it really?
Well, and that brings us right squarely onto the point of, do we really need to consume all this media? I mean, not to be cold or insensitive, but if some massacre happened in in the Middle East or in Africa, does that directly affect us in any way?
Well, Josh, I was just thinking of what you said before you said it. I was thinking of this example that Jacob and I discussed a while ago, and it sounds really coarse, but I think that if people are honest, they will agree with this. Well, we were saying that, I mean, literally, if our dog died, it's going to have more effect on our life than if 1 million people got wiped out wherever it is.
That's right.
And it's not like we don't care about people, and certainly our values are in line with caring about what happens to other people. But the reality is, my day is going to be affected a lot more if something happens to my dog than if something happens to 1 million people in whatever, even in our own country.
And I agree. If people are honest, then they're going to agree with that.
It's really scary to think
yeah, I mean,
that
you
that's
could say,
how
that's a terrible thing, and
it's
maybe
the
it
truth.
is, but I mean...
It's the truth.
But the question is, the overriding question is, do we need to consume all this media?
No.
What is it doing for us? Is it altering the way we live? Is it altering the way that we treat our neighbor? Is it altering anything about...
Is it altering a decision that we might make that might have an effect? I don't know.
I think to the most recent example of watching, the Trump event versus the debate and the Democratic debate the week before, and we just got so sick of the whole thing, we stopped it early and we left.
All of it.
And I mean, it was just... Those are people who we should be agreeing with, and who a lot of the times we do agree with.
Or disagree.
Yeah, exactly. Where we have feelings about what they're saying, and it's obviously super important on a big scale. And we were just so sick of the way it was being presented and the way it was being handled that we just couldn't watch it anymore.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, my feeling is that having all this media to consume and all this news about things that are going off in faraway places, all it's doing is desensitizing us. I mean, what does it do to put these graphic images, or to even create this image in our own minds of these people being massacred or this bomb going off in whatever city?
Yeah.
What benefit does that have to us?
Well, think about it. There could be a benefit, whether it's to us directly or to other people, which we would say has some value, if we saw that X was happening wherever, and then we go through the channels that are ostensibly set up to affect things. We work through those channels, and whatever happened wherever it is gets affected by our so-called leader. Then you could say that there's a value in having that information. But the reality is, to a large extent, if we go through those channels, we're not affecting anything.
It's a dead
anymore.
end.
What they're doing is they're playing on our fears, and then the people that can make a difference aren't.
Yeah, well, they're playing on our fears, eliciting a reaction, and then the reaction doesn't come to anything. It's useless.
I mean, because to a large extent, the same people who we're pleading to do something about whatever it is are part of the group that caused whatever it is. And we're so naive sometimes to think, well, if they only...
You can say stupid.
The idea that, well, they're going to change... Well, they're the ones who did it.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, the example of a cop shooting someone unfairly, then we go complain to the judicial system about it, and all they do is protect their buddy and the other part of the government.
When you hear, and my background is such that I've been involved with this on this kind of level, but the idea that there's a police shooting and, quote, internal affairs handles the investigation.
Right.
I mean, it sounds okay, but if there's not something that